In the quiet hours before dawn, when the world holds its breath between yesterday's regrets and tomorrow's possibilities, a prince sits alone in his study. The weight of tradition presses against his shoulders like an invisible crown, while outside his window, the ancient stones of his family's legacy cast long shadows in the moonlight. His phone rests in trembling hands, a simple device that holds the power to bridge an ocean of separation, misunderstanding, and wounded pride. Across the Atlantic, in the golden warmth of California sunshine, a former actress tends to her garden, unaware that thousands of miles away, her name echoes in the silence of a room where royal portraits seem to watch with centuries-old judgment. The distance between them is measured not just in miles, but in harsh words spoken, bridges burned, and a love story that the world watched crumble in real time. But love, real love, has a way of refusing to stay buried. It claws its way through hurt and betrayal, through public humiliation and private anguish. It whispers in the quiet moments when pride finally exhausts itself and the heart remembers what truly matters. Tonight, that whisper has become a roar that drowns out everything else. The expectations, the protocols, the very machinery of monarchy itself. The phone screen glows like a beacon in the darkness, displaying a number he knows by heart, but hasn't dared to call. Two simple words wait to be spoken, words that could heal or destroy, words that carry the weight of everything they once were and everything they might still become. Meg. This is the story of that call and the extraordinary chain of events it set into motion. Prince Harry Windsor sat in the oak-paneled study of his Montecito home, staring at his phone with the intensity of a man drowning who has just spotted a life raft. The California sun streamed through the tall windows, casting geometric patterns across the Persian rug beneath his feet, but he barely noticed. His world had narrowed to the small screen in his palm, and the contact name that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat, Meghan. 3 months had passed since their last conversation, a bitter exchange of accusations and hurt feelings that had ended with her hanging up on him. The sound of that disconnected line still echoed in his mind during sleepless nights when the weight of his choices pressed down on him like a physical force. He had replayed that conversation hundreds of times, each word dissected and analyzed until it lost all meaning except the pain it carried. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was alone in a house they had chosen together, surrounded by the life they had built as a team. Every room held memories that now felt like ghosts haunting him. The kitchen where Meghan had taught him to make her grandmother's pancake recipe, her laughter filling the space as he inevitably burned the first batch. The garden where they had planted herbs together, their hands dirty with California soil as they dreamed of the simple life they thought they were building. The bedroom where they had held each other through the storms of public criticism and family disappointment, promising that as long as they had each other, they could weather anything. But promises, Harry had learned, were fragile things. They could be broken by the weight of expectations, shattered by the relentless pressure of living under a microscope, and destroyed by the accumulation of small betrayals and misunderstandings that grew into mountains between two people who had once shared everything. The trouble had started slowly, like a crack in a foundation that goes unnoticed until the whole structure begins to shift. It began with the interviews, that tell-all conversations that had seemed like liberation at the time, but had gradually become a source of tension between them. Harry had wanted to share their truth, to push back against the narrative that painted Meghan as a divisive figure who had stolen him away from his family and his duty. But each revelation, each moment of honesty, had consequences that rippled through both their lives in ways they hadn't anticipated. Meghan had grown tired of being defined by her relationship to the royal family, tired of every story about her beginning with her former title or her brief time as a working royal. She wanted to be known for her work, her advocacy, her vision for change in the world. But the public seemed endlessly fascinated by palace intrigue and family drama, and the media had a voracious appetite for stories that pitted her against Catherine or painted her as the woman who had changed Harry beyond recognition. The pressure had affected their communication in subtle ways at first. Conversations that used to flow easily became more guarded, each of them careful not to say anything that might be misconstrued or used against them later. The spontaneity that had marked their early relationship gave way to a more calculated approach to their public image, and, gradually, that calculation had crept into their private moments as well. Harry found himself second-guessing every decision, wondering if his choices were truly his own or if they were being influenced by advisors, public opinion, or his desire to protect Meghan from criticism. The man who had once been known for his authenticity and emotional openness had become a stranger to himself, someone who weighed every word and measured every action against its potential consequences. Meghan, for her part, had thrown herself into work with an intensity that spoke of both passion and escape. Her projects multiplied, her schedule became impossibly packed, and their time together became increasingly rare and precious. When they were together, the weight of unspoken frustrations and unresolved conflicts hung between them like a fog that neither seemed able to clear. The final fight had been about something ridiculously small: Harry's comment in an interview about feeling trapped by his family circumstances. Meghan had felt blindsided by his words, hurt that he would use language that echoed her own experiences without consulting her first. She worried that his statement would be seen as validation for those who claimed she had manipulated him into leaving royal life, and she was frustrated that once again, their personal business was being dissected in public forums. Harry had defended his right to speak his own truth, arguing that censoring himself to protect her image was just another form of the control they had fled when they left England. The conversation had escalated quickly, both of them saying things they didn't mean, until Meghan had finally said the words that had haunted him ever since. Maybe we need some time apart to figure out who we are when we're not performing for the cameras. The weeks that followed had been a kind of purgatory. They lived in the same house, but moved around each other like polite strangers, their conversations limited to logistics about Archie and Lilibet, their shared schedule, and the mundane details of maintaining their public commitments. The space between them grew wider each day, filled with all the things they weren't saying to each other. Harry had thrown himself into his charitable work, traveling more than he had in months, as if constant movement could outrun the growing certainty that he was losing the person who mattered most to him. But everywhere he went, people asked about Meghan, about their projects together, about their plans for the future. He found himself making excuses, deflecting questions, and maintaining a facade that everything was fine when nothing felt fine at all. The breaking point had come 2 weeks ago, when Harry had returned from a trip to find Meghan's closet half empty and a note on his pillow explaining that she had taken the children to stay with friends while she figured things out. The note was kind but firm, explaining that she needed space to rediscover herself outside of their public persona and their relationship dynamics. She promised that it wasn't permanent, that she still loved him, but that she couldn't continue living in a situation where they seemed to be playing roles instead of being themselves. Harry had read that note so many times that he had memorized every word, every curve of her handwriting. He had slept with it under his pillow for 3 nights before finally putting it in his desk drawer, where it sat like a ticking bomb next to their wedding photos and the love letters they had written to each other during their courtship. The house had felt impossibly large and empty without them. Harry had wandered from room to room like a ghost, starting projects he couldn't finish, beginning conversations with himself that led nowhere. He had called his therapist, his closest friends, even his brother William in a moment of desperation, but nothing seemed to ease the ache in his chest or the growing certainty that he was on the verge of losing everything that mattered to him. Now, sitting in the study where he had once felt so hopeful about their future, Harry realized that all his pride, all his careful consideration of consequences and public image meant nothing if Meghan wasn't in his life. The thought of their children growing up in a broken home, of becoming another statistic of royal marriages that couldn't survive the pressure, filled him with a determination he hadn't felt in months. His finger hovered over her contact information, and for a moment, all his fears rushed back. What if she didn't answer? What if she had moved on, decided that their separation was actually a liberation? What if his call pushed her further away instead of bringing her home? But then he thought about Archie asking when Mommy was coming home, and Lilibet's confused tears when she couldn't find Meghan at bedtime. He thought about all the dreams they had shared, all the plans they had made, all the love that couldn't just disappear because they had lost their way for a while. Taking a deep breath, Harry pressed the call button and waited, his heart pounding so hard he was sure Meghan would be able to hear it when she answered. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, and just when he thought it would go to voicemail, he heard the click of connection and the silence that meant she was there, waiting for him to speak. "Meg," he said, and then again, louder, with all the love and desperation and hope he had been carrying for months. "Meg." The silence on the other end of the line stretched like an eternity, filled with the weight of everything unsaid between them. Harry could hear Meghan breathing, a soft rhythm that he had once found so comforting during their nights together, and now was the only proof he had that she was still there, still listening, still willing to hear what he had to say. "Harry." Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper, but it carried so much emotion that it hit him like a physical blow. He could hear the surprise, the wariness, but underneath it all, something that might have been relief. "I didn't think you would call. I had to," he said, and his voice cracked on the words. "I can't do this anymore, Meg. I can't pretend that I'm okay without you. I can't keep living in this house that's full of us, but empty of everything that matters." He heard her sharp intake of breath, and then another silence that felt different from the first. This one was softer somehow, less defensive, as if his raw honesty had created a small opening in the walls they had built between them. "Where are you?" he asked, when the quiet became too much to bear. "I'm at the beach," she said, and he could picture her there, probably sitting on the sand with her knees drawn up to her chest, watching the waves and thinking about everything that had gone wrong between them. "The kids are napping at Sarah's house. I needed some air, some space to think." "What are you thinking about?" Another pause, longer this time, and when she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "I'm thinking about how we got here, Harry. How two people who love each other as much as we do ended up feeling like strangers. I'm thinking about whether love is enough to fix all the things we've broken." Harry closed his eyes, feeling the truth of her words settle over him like a heavy blanket. They had loved each other fiercely from the beginning, with a passion that had swept away all obstacles and made them believe they could conquer anything together. But love, he was learning, was just the foundation. Everything else, communication, trust, shared goals, the ability to weather storms together, had to be built on top of that foundation, and somewhere along the way they had stopped building and started just trying to survive. "I've been doing some thinking too," he said, staring out of the garden where they had planted herbs together, now overgrown and wild from his neglect. "About the interview, about everything I said. You were right to be angry with me, Meg. I should have talked to you first, should have considered how my words would affect you." "It's not just about the interview," Meghan said, and he could hear her shifting, probably drawing patterns in the sand with her finger the way she did when she was processing difficult emotions. "It's about how we stopped being a team. Somewhere along the way, we started protecting ourselves instead of protecting each other." The truth of her observation hit him like a punch to the gut. When had they stopped being partners and started being individuals who happened to live in the same house? When had they started calculating the cost of their honesty instead of simply trusting each other with their truth? "I miss you," he said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "I miss talking to you about everything and nothing. I miss the way you laugh when I tell bad jokes. I miss falling asleep next to you and waking up to your face. I miss being us, Meg. I miss being the person I am when I'm with you." He heard her breath catch, and when she spoke, her voice was unsteady. "I miss you too. But, Harry, missing each other isn't enough. We have to figure out how to be together without losing ourselves in the process. We have to learn how to navigate this life we've chosen without destroying each other. Then, let's figure out," he said, leaning forward in his chair as if he could somehow reach through the phone and touch her. "Let's stop running away from the problems and start facing them together. Come home, Meg. Bring the kids home, and let's work on this." "It's not that simple," she said, and he could hear the tears in her voice now. "There are things we need to talk about, decisions we need to make about how we want to live our lives going forward. We can't just go back to the way things were before." "I don't want to go back," Harry said, and he meant it. "I want to go forward, but I want to do it with you. I want us to be honest with each other about what we need, what we want, what we're afraid of. I want us to build something better than what we had before. What if we can't? The question came out small and scared, and it broke his heart to hear the doubt in her voice. What if we try and we just end up hurting each other again? What if we're too different, want too many different things? Harry thought about that question, really considered it, because he knew she deserved his honest answer, not just the answer he thought she wanted to hear. They were different in many ways. She was more cautious, more strategic, while he was more impulsive, more willing to act on emotion. She thought about long-term consequences while he focused on immediate impact. She was better at reading people and situations, while he was better at inspiring action and change. But those differences had once been their strength, the thing that made them better together than either of them was alone. She balanced his impulsiveness with her wisdom, while he encouraged her to take risks and trust her instincts. They challenged each other, pushed each other to grow, made each other braver and kinder and more thoughtful. I think we want the same things, he said finally. We want to make a difference in the world. We want to raise our children to be kind and compassionate and strong. We want to be authentic, to live according to our values instead of other people's expectations. We want to love each other and be loved in return. Then, why does it feel so hard? She asked, and the question was filled with such genuine confusion and pain that it took everything in Harry not to hang up the phone and drive to wherever she was so he could hold her while they figured it out together. Because love isn't a feeling, it's a choice, he said, remembering something his therapist had told him during one of their sessions. And we have to choose it every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. We stopped choosing each other, Meg. We started choosing our careers, our public image, our individual goals, but we stopped choosing us. He heard her breathing change, becoming deeper and more steady, as if his words had given her something to hold on to. I want to choose us, she said quietly. But I need to know that you do too, really do, not just when things get desperate, but every day in all the small moments when it would be easier to choose something else. I choose you, Harry said, and the words felt like a vow, like a promise he was making not just to her but to himself. I choose you when you're angry with me and when you're disappointed in me. I choose you when the world is criticizing us and when our families don't understand. I choose you when it's easy and when it's impossible. I choose you, Meg, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that to you. The silence that followed was different from all the others. This one was full of possibility, heavy with the weight of a decision being made. Harry held his breath, waiting for her response, knowing that his entire future hung on what she said next. I'm scared, she said finally, her voice so soft he had to strain to hear her. I'm scared of falling back into the same patterns. I'm scared of losing myself again. I'm scared of hurting you, of disappointing the children, of failing at the thing that matters most to me. I'm scared too, he admitted. But I'm more scared of giving up on us without really trying. I'm more scared of looking back in 10 years and wondering what would have happened if we had been brave enough to fight for each other instead of fighting each other. We would need help, she said, and he could hear her mind working, already starting to plan, to strategize, to figure out how they could make it work. Counseling, probably. New boundaries around work and public appearances. Better communication strategies. We'd have to learn how to be partners again instead of just co-parents and business associates. Yes to all of that, Harry said immediately. Whatever it takes, Meg. Whatever you need, whatever we need, I'm willing to do the work. And we'd have to be honest, she continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. Really honest about everything. Our fears, our resentments, our needs, our dreams. No more performing, no more saying what we think the other person wants to hear. Especially that, he agreed. I want to know you, really know you, not just the version of you that you think I can handle. And I want you to know me the same way, even the parts that aren't pretty or heroic or royal. He heard her laugh, then a small, shaky sound that was like music to his ears because it was the first time he had heard her laugh in months, and it gave him hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. Okay, she said, and the word was like a gift, like a door opening, like the sun breaking through clouds after a storm. Okay, let's try. Let's come home and figure out how to be us again. Harry felt tears streaming down his face, relief and joy and gratitude overwhelming him all at once. Thank you, he said. Thank you for being brave enough to try again. Don't thank me yet, Meghan said, but he could hear the smile in her voice. We haven't done the hard part yet. What, Harry? Yeah, I love you. I've never stopped loving you. Not for a single day. I love you too, he said. Always and completely and without reservation. I'll see you soon, she said, and this time when she hung up, the silence felt like a beginning instead of an ending. Harry spent the 2 hours after their phone call in a state of nervous energy that he couldn't quite contain. He cleaned the house from top to bottom, something he hadn't bothered to do properly since Meghan had left. He changed the sheets on their bed, replaced the wilted flowers in the vase on the kitchen counter with fresh ones from their garden, and even attempted to cook something that resembled a proper meal, though his culinary skills had always been questionable at best. Every few minutes, he found himself checking his phone, not for messages, but just to confirm that the call had actually happened, that he hadn't imagined the sound of hope in Meghan's voice or the promise that she would come home. The house that had felt like a mausoleum for weeks now hummed with possibility, and Harry moved through it like a man preparing for the most important meeting of his life. Because in many ways, that's exactly what this was. They had agreed to try again, but Harry knew that the woman who walked through his front door wouldn't be the same person who had left. The separation had changed both of them, forced them to confront parts of themselves and their relationship that they had been avoiding. They would be meeting each other as different people than they had been before, and there was no guarantee that these new versions of themselves would be compatible. The sound of a car in the driveway made his heart leap into his throat. Through the window, he watched Meghan emerge from the passenger seat of Sarah's car, moving slowly as if she too was nervous about this reunion. She lifted Lilibet from her car seat while Archie scrambled out on his own, already running toward the front door with the uncomplicated joy of a child who was simply happy to be home. Harry opened the door before they could knock, and for a moment, he and Meghan just looked at each other across the threshold. She was wearing a simple sundress and sandals, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, and she looked tired in a way that went deeper than physical exhaustion. But she was beautiful, achingly beautiful, and the sight of her standing in their doorway made him realize how empty his world had been without her. "Daddy!" Archie launched himself into Harry's arms, and the familiar weight of his son grounded him, reminded him of everything he had been fighting for during these long weeks of separation. "I missed you. Did you miss me? Mommy said we could come home now." "I missed you more than words can say," Harry said, burying his face in Archie's hair and breathing in the sweet scent that was uniquely his son. "Both of you," he added, reaching out to touch Lilibet's cheek as she dozed against Meghan's shoulder. "Hello, Harry," Meghan said, her voice carefully neutral, but her eyes were searching his face as if looking for some sign of the man she had fallen in love with beneath all the layers of hurt and misunderstanding they had accumulated. "Hello, Meg," he replied, and the simple exchange felt monumental, like the first words spoken in a new language they were learning together. The next few hours were a careful dance of domestic normalcy. They settled the children back into their routines, unpacked Meghan's bags, and moved around each other with the polite consideration of house guests rather than the easy familiarity of partners. Harry found himself hyper-aware of everything. The way Meghan avoided his eyes when she thought he wasn't looking, the careful space she maintained between them, the way she seemed to be bracing herself for disappointment. After the children were in bed, they finally found themselves alone together in the kitchen, the silence between them heavy with everything they needed to say but didn't know how to begin. Meghan sat at the counter with a cup of tea, while Harry stood by the window, both of them maintaining the careful distance they had established without discussing it. "So," Meghan said finally, her voice cutting through the quiet, "where do we start?" Harry turned to face her, taking in the guarded expression on her face, the way she held her shoulders as if preparing for battle. "I don't know," he admitted. "I keep thinking about all the things I want to say to you, but now that you're here, it all feels inadequate." "Maybe we should start with the basics," she suggested. "What happened to us, Harry? How did we go from being best friends who could talk about anything to two people who couldn't have a conversation without it turning into a fight?" Harry considered the question seriously, because he knew their future depended on his ability to be honest about their past. "I think we stopped trusting each other," he said slowly. "Not with the big things, but with the small ones. We stopped sharing our doubts, and fears because we were afraid of burdening each other or being judged. We started editing ourselves. Meghan nodded, her fingers wrapped around her mug like it was an anchor. I remember the exact moment I realized I was doing that, she said. It was after that interview where the reporter asked me about feeling isolated from your family. I want to tell you how much that question had hurt, how it brought up all my insecurities about whether I really belonged in your world. But instead, I just said it went fine and changed the subject. Why? Harry asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. Because you were already dealing with so much criticism about the interviews, about our decision to step back, about everything. I didn't want to add to your stress by admitting that I was struggling too. She looked up at him then, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I thought I was protecting you, but I was really protecting myself from the possibility that you might agree with the people who said I was too much trouble. The admission hit Harry like a physical blow. Meg, you could never be too much trouble. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. The fact that you thought you couldn't share your pain with me, that's on me, not you. No, she said firmly, shaking her head. It's on both of us. Because you were doing the same thing, weren't you? Editing yourself, trying to be the version of Harry that you thought I needed instead of just being yourself. He thought about all the times he had swallowed his frustration about their packed schedule, his longing for simpler times when they could just be a family without cameras and deadlines and public scrutiny. He thought about all the moments when he had wanted to express doubt about a project or a decision, but had stayed silent because he didn't want to seem unsupportive of Meghan's ambitions. Yeah, he said quietly. I was. They sat with that acknowledgement for a moment, both of them recognizing the pattern that had slowly eroded the foundation of their relationship. It hadn't been dramatic or sudden. It had been a gradual process of small deceptions and withheld truths that had created an ocean of distance between them. I want to tell you something, Meghan said, setting down her mug and looking directly at him. And I need you to hear it without trying to fix it or argue with it or make it better, okay? Harry nodded, bracing himself for whatever was coming. I felt invisible in our marriage for months, she said, her voice steady but filled with pain. Not because you don't see me, but because the version of me that you see isn't complete. You see Meghan the activist, Meghan the mother, Meghan the duchess, Meghan the public figure. But you stop seeing Meghan the woman who has doubts and fears and bad days and petty grievances and moments of profound insecurity. Meg, you said you'd just listen, she reminded him gently. You're right. I'm sorry. Go on. I need you to love all of me, Harry, not just the parts that are easy or admirable or convenient. I need to be able to tell you when I'm jealous of Catherine's seemingly effortless grace or when I'm frustrated with your mother's memory being used to justify criticism of me. I need to be able to admit when I'm scared that I'm not good enough for this life we've chosen or smart enough for the responsibilities we've taken on. Harry felt his chest tighten with emotion as he recognized the truth in her words. Somewhere along the way, he had put Meghan on a pedestal, expecting her to be endlessly strong and resilient and inspiring. He had fallen in love with her humanity, but then he had somehow forgotten to make space for it in their daily life. I want to know all of you, he said, his voice rough with emotion. The parts that are struggling, the parts that are angry, the parts that don't have all the answers. I want you to trust me with your worst days and your darkest thoughts. I want to love you completely, not just the version of you that you think I can handle. Can you do that? She asked, and the vulnerability in her voice broke his heart. Can you love me when I'm being unreasonable, or when I make mistakes, or when I need you to take care of me instead of the other way around? Yes, he said without hesitation. But I need the same thing from you, Meg. I need you to see me as a man who's still figuring things out, who doesn't always know the right thing to say or do. I need you to love Harry the person, not just Harry the prince, or Harry the humanitarian, or Harry the public figure. I do love Harry the person, she said, tears finally spilling over. I love the man who burns pancakes and leaves his socks on the floor and cries at sad movies. I love the man who's still healing from his own wounds and trying to figure out how to be a good father and husband while carrying the weight of his family's expectations. Then, why does it feel like we've been strangers? He asked, moving closer to her, but still maintaining the careful distance she seemed to need. Because we've been performing our marriage instead of living it, she said. Every conversation became about logistics or public image or damage control. We stopped being curious about each other, stopped asking how the other person was really doing beyond the surface level. Harry recognized the truth of what she was saying. Their conversations had become increasingly functional, focused on schedules and responsibilities and external pressures. When was the last time they had talked about their dreams, their fears, their hopes for the future? When was the last time they had simply enjoyed each other's company without an agenda or a deadline? I want to be curious about you again, he said. I want to ask you how you're doing and really listen to the answer. I want to know what you're reading, what you're thinking about when you stare out at the ocean, what makes you laugh when no one's watching. I want that too, she said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. But, Harry, we can't just flip a switch and go back to how things were in the beginning. We have to build something new, something stronger. And that means making some changes to how we live our lives. What kind of changes? Meghan took a deep breath, and Harry could see her gathering her courage for what she was about to say. I think we need to scale back on some of our public commitments. Not permanently, but for a while we work on ourselves and our relationship. I think we need to say no to more things so we can say yes to each other. The suggestion made Harry's stomach clench with anxiety. Their public work was important to both of them, and stepping back felt like admitting defeat, like proving their critics right when they said the couple couldn't handle the pressure of their position. But then he looked at Meghan's face, saw the hope and fear warring in her expression, and realized that no amount of public success would matter if he lost his family in the process. What would that look like, he asked. Fewer interviews, more selective project choices, better boundaries around our private time, she said. I want to wake up on Saturday mornings and not know exactly what we're doing for the next 6 weeks. I want to be able to plan a family vacation without having to clear it with a dozen different people. I want our children to see us enjoying each other's company instead of just managing logistics together. And what about the work that matters to us? Harry asked because he needed to understand how they could balance their personal needs with their shared commitment to making a difference in the world. We keep doing the work, Meghan said, but we do it more intentionally, more strategically. We choose projects that align with our values instead of saying yes to everything that comes our way. We focus on quality over quantity, impact over visibility. Harry considered her proposal, trying to imagine what their life would look like with more space, more time, more opportunities to simply be themselves without the constant pressure of public scrutiny. It was appealing and terrifying in equal measure. It means disappointing some people, he said, thinking about all the requests they would have to decline, all the opportunities they would have to pass up. Yes, Meghan agreed. But, Harry, we're already disappointing the most important people in our lives, each other and our children. I'd rather disappoint strangers than my family. The simple truth of her statement settled over him like a revelation. They had spent so much energy trying to meet everyone else's expectations that they had forgotten to protect what mattered most. Their marriage wasn't just a personal relationship. It was the foundation that everything else was built on. If they lost that, all their public work would be meaningless. Okay, he said, and felt something like relief wash over him as he said it. Let's do it. Let's prioritize us for a while and see what happens. Meghan's face transformed with surprise and hope, as if she hadn't quite believed he would agree. Really, he confirmed. But I have one condition. Her expression grew wary. What? We do this together. Every decision, every choice, every boundary we set, we make it as a team. No more unilateral decisions. No more protecting each other from difficult conversations. We're partners in this, completely and without reservation. Partners, she repeated, as if testing a word. I like the sound of that. For the first time since she had walked through the door, Meghan smiled at him, really smiled, and Harry felt something ease in his chest that he hadn't even realized was clenched tight. They still had so much work to do, so many conversations to have, so many patterns to unlearn and rebuild. But for the first time in months, he believed they could do it. So, he said, moving closer to her and, finally, carefully reaching out to touch her hand. Partners, she confirmed. And when she didn't pull away from his touch, he felt like they had just taken the first real step toward finding their way back to each other. The weeks that followed Meghan's return were unlike anything Harry had experienced in his adult life. They were learning how to be married to each other all over again, but this time with the knowledge of how easily things could fall apart if they weren't careful, vigilant, and completely honest with each other. Their first counseling session had been awkward and painful, sitting in Dr. Martinez's office like strangers who happened to share a name and a history. The therapist had asked them to describe their relationship, and the gap between Harry's description and Meghan's had been so wide that for a moment, Harry had wondered if they were talking about the same marriage. He had focused on their shared work, their commitment to their children, their ability to present a united front to the world. Meghan had talked about feeling lonely, misunderstood, and increasingly disconnected from the man she had married. The contrast had been stark and sobering, and it had forced Harry to confront just how much he had been avoiding the emotional reality of their relationship. The good news, Dr. Martinez had said at the end of that first session, is that you're both here and you're both willing to do the work. The challenging news is that rebuilding trust and intimacy after a period of disconnection takes time and a lot of uncomfortable conversations. She hadn't been kidding about the uncomfortable conversations. They had instituted a daily check-in ritual where they sat together for 30 minutes each evening and shared how they were really feeling, not just about their day, but about their relationship, their individual struggles, and their hopes for the future. These conversations were sometimes stilted, sometimes emotional, and occasionally led to arguments that left them both exhausted. But slowly, gradually, Harry began to see glimpses of the woman he had fallen in love with. Not the polished public version of Meghan, but the private one who admitted to crying in grocery stores when she felt overwhelmed, who confessed to Googling relationship advice at 3 a.m, who sometimes felt like she was failing at everything despite all evidence to the contrary. In return, he had learned to share his own vulnerabilities. He told her about the panic attacks he had been having since she left, the way he sometimes woke up in the middle of the night convinced that he had dreamed their reconciliation. He admitted to feeling jealous of their friends' seemingly effortless relationships, to wondering if he was fundamentally broken in some way that made him impossible to love fully. "You're not broken," Meghan had said one evening when he had shared his deepest fears about his worthiness as a partner. "You're human, and humans have to learn how to love each other well. It's not something that comes naturally to most of us." The insight had come during their third week of rebuilding, and it had shifted something fundamental in how Harry understood their struggles. They weren't failing at marriage because they were uniquely damaged or incompatible. They were learning a skill that required practice, patience, and a willingness to keep trying even when it felt impossible. One of the biggest changes they had made was in how they structured their daily life. True to their agreement, they had turned down several high-profile speaking engagements and postponed the launch of a documentary series they had been developing. The decision had generated speculation in the media about their commitment to their public work, but it had also given them something they hadn't had in years' time. Time to take walks together in the evening without discussing their schedule for the next day. Time to cook meals together, with Meghan teaching Harry family recipes while he made her laugh with his running commentary on cooking shows. Time to read books at the same time and discuss them, to watch movies that had nothing to do with their work, to simply exist in the same space without an agenda. Harry had forgotten how much he enjoyed Meghan's sense of humor, the way she could find something amusing in almost any situation. He had forgotten how smart she was about things that had nothing to do with their public work, how she could analyze a novel or a political situation or a parenting challenge with insight that always made him see things differently. Meghan, for her part, seemed to be rediscovering the man she had married. She had commented one morning about how relaxed he looked, how the tension he had been carrying in his shoulders for months had finally started to ease. She had started seeking out his opinion again, not just on logistics, but on the things that mattered to her personally, professionally, emotionally. But perhaps the biggest change was in how they handled conflict. Before their separation, their arguments had become increasingly about winning or being right or protecting their individual positions. Now, with Dr. Martinez's guidance and their own hard-won understanding of how much they had to lose, they were learning to fight for their relationship instead of against each other. The first real test of this new approach had come when they received an invitation to attend a major charity gala in London, an event that would have been professionally beneficial, but would also have meant their first public appearance together since the reconciliation. Harry had been inclined to accept, seeing it as an opportunity to show the world that they were stronger than ever. Meghan had wanted to decline, feeling that they weren't ready for that level of public scrutiny while they were still rebuilding their foundation. In the past, this disagreement might have turned into a days-long battle of wills, with each of them marshaling evidence for their position and trying to convince the other that their perspective was the only reasonable one. This time, they talked through their different viewpoints, acknowledged the validity of each other's concerns, and worked together to find a solution that honored both their needs. They declined a London event, but accepted a smaller, more intimate gathering for a cause that was particularly meaningful to both of them. It was a compromise that neither of them had originally wanted, but it felt right for where they were in their healing process. The evening of the event, Harry watched Meghan get ready with a mixture of nervousness and pride. They had agreed that this would be their first public appearance as a couple since her return, and while the event was smaller and more controlled than the London Gala would have been, it still represented a significant step in their journey back to each other. "How are you feeling?" he asked as she put the finishing touches on her makeup. "Nervous," she admitted, meeting his eyes in the mirror. "But good nervous, if that makes sense. Like we're ready for this, but I'm still scared that something will happen to set us back." "What if something does happen?" Harry asked, genuinely curious about her answer. "What if someone asks an uncomfortable question, or we disagree about something in public, or one of us says something that gets taken out of context?" Meghan turned to face him fully, and he could see her thinking through the possibilities. "Then we handle it together," she said finally. "We remember that we're on the same team, and we deal with whatever comes up as partners instead of as individuals trying to protect ourselves." "Together," Harry repeated, and the word felt like a promise. The event itself was both easier and harder than either of them had expected. Easier because their connection felt genuine again, their conversations with others flowing naturally as they supported each other's responses and built on each other's insights. Harder because the outside world's interest in their relationship was intense and sometimes uncomfortable, with people watching their every interaction for signs of tension or reconciliation. But they navigated it successfully, and more importantly, they did it as a team. When a reporter asked a probing question about their recent time apart, Harry looked to Meghan before answering, making sure they were both comfortable with what he was about to say. When someone made a comment that could have been interpreted as critical of their decision to step back from certain commitments, Meghan responded in a way that supported both their choice and Harry's role in making it. Driving home afterward, Harry felt lighter than he had in months. "We did good tonight," he said, reaching over to take Meghan's hand. "We did," she agreed, squeezing his fingers. "It felt like us again, but better. Like we were really supporting each other instead of just performing partnership. Is that what we were doing before?" Harry asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "Sometimes," Meghan said thoughtfully. "I think we got so focused on looking like the perfect couple that we forgot to actually be one. Tonight felt different. More real. More sustainable," Harry added, thinking about how natural it had felt to check in with her, to make sure they were aligned before responding to difficult questions or situations. "Exactly," Meghan said. "Like we could do this for the rest of our lives without burning out or losing ourselves in the process." They drove in comfortable silence for a while, both of them processing the evening and what it meant for their future. Harry found himself thinking about all the events they would attend together going forward, all the challenges they would face, all the opportunities they would have to choose each other over and over again. "Meg," he said as they pulled into their driveway, "I want you to know that tonight wasn't just about proving something to the world or getting back to normal. For me, it was about choosing to build a life with you that we both actually want to live." "What kind of life is that?" she asked, though her smile suggested she already knew the answer. "One where we get to be ourselves, completely and without apology," Harry said. "One where we support each other's dreams, but don't sacrifice our relationship for them. One where our children see us loving each other not just in the easy moments, but especially in the hard ones." "I want that too," Meghan said. "I want all of that." As they walked into their house together, Harry felt something he hadn't experienced in over a year: complete confidence in their future. Not because their problems were solved or their challenges were behind them, but because they had learned how to face whatever came next as true partners, committed not just to staying together, but to growing together. They had found their way back to each other, but more than that, they had found their way to a deeper, more intentional version of love than they had ever known before. And for the first time since their wedding day, Harry was certain that their best days were still ahead of them. 6 months after that desperate phone call on the beach, Harry and Meghan stood together in their renovated home office, looking at the vision board they had created during one of their counseling sessions. The board was covered with images and words that represented their shared goals. Pictures of their children laughing, quotes about authentic leadership, photos of the causes they cared about most, and in the center, a simple handwritten note that read, "Choose each other every day." The room itself had been transformed from Harry's solitary study into a shared workspace where they could collaborate on their projects while still maintaining their individual identities. Meghan's desk faced the garden, where she could see the herbs they had replanted together, now thriving in neat rows that reflected their renewed commitment to tending the things that mattered. Harry's workspace looked out toward the ocean, a reminder of the vastness of possibilities that lay ahead of them. "I can't believe it's been 6 months," Meghan said, settling in her chair with a cup of the lavender tea that had become their evening ritual. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I was sitting on that beach, wondering if we were going to make it. And sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago," Harry added, pulling up the chair he had moved from across the room to right beside her desk. Physical proximity had become important to them during their rebuilding process, a tangible reminder that they were choosing to be close to each other in every sense of the word. They had been working on their annual planning session, a new tradition they had instituted to ensure that their professional commitments aligned with their personal values and relationship goals. Gone were the days of accepting every opportunity that came their way. Now they carefully evaluated each potential project against criteria they had developed together. Does this serve our mission? Does it allow us to maintain our family priorities? Does it bring us joy or just obligation? The current year had been their most selective yet, and also their most fulfilling. They had chosen 3 major initiatives to focus on: a mental health awareness campaign that drew from both their personal experiences and their desire to normalize conversations about emotional well-being, a children's literacy program that combined Meghan's passion for education with Harry's commitment to supporting underserved communities, and a documentary series about couples who had overcome significant challenges in their relationships. The documentary project had been particularly meaningful because it had grown directly out of their own healing journey. After months of therapy and rebuilding, they had realized that their story might be helpful to other couples who were struggling to maintain their connection in the face of external pressures and internal challenges. "I got the final edit of the documentary trailer today," Meghan said, turning her laptop screen so Harry could see. "Do you want to watch it together?" Harry nodded, settling closer to her as she pressed play. The trailer opened with a montage of couples from different backgrounds and stages of life, all talking about moments when their relationships had felt broken beyond repair. The images were interspersed with shots of Harry and Meghan in their own counseling sessions, their faces raw with emotion as they worked through their problems with Dr. Martinez. "Love isn't a destination," Harry's voice played over a scene of him and Meghan working in their garden. "It's a daily practice, a choice you make over and over again, especially when it's hard." The trailer showed other couples learning the same lessons they had learned: how to fight for their relationship instead of against each other, how to maintain individual identity while building shared purpose, how to navigate public scrutiny and private challenges without losing sight of what really mattered. "We thought our love story was over," Meghan's voice continued as the screen showed a photo of them on their wedding day, followed by newspaper headlines about their separation. "But it turned out we were just ending one chapter, so we could begin a better one." Harry felt his eyes fill with tears as he watched their story unfold, not because it was painful, but because it was so clearly a story of triumph. They had been broken individually and together, and they had found a way to heal that made them stronger than they had ever been before. "I love it," he said as the trailer ended. "I love that it's honest about how hard it was, but also hopeful about what's possible when you're willing to do the work." "I hope it helps people," Meghan said. "I hope it helps them understand that struggling doesn't mean failing, that needing help doesn't mean you're weak. It will, Harry said with certainty, because it's true, and people can feel truth even when they can't always recognize it. They had learned that lesson themselves over the past months. The public response to their more selective approach to their work had been mixed, with some critics suggesting they were becoming less relevant or committed to their causes. But the responses that mattered from the people they served, from their colleagues in the charitable sector, from their own children, had been overwhelmingly positive. Archie had commented just the week before that Daddy and Mommy seemed happier now, and when Harry had asked him what he meant, their son had said, "You smile at each other more, and you're not always looking at your phones when we're playing." The observation had been both heartbreaking and encouraging, a reminder of how much their children noticed and how important their example was in shaping their kids' understanding of what love looked like. Lilibet, now old enough to express preferences and opinions, had started asking for family time in the evenings, a concept she had picked up from overhearing their conversations about work-life balance. Her requests usually involved all four of them piling onto the couch for stories or games, and these moments had become some of Harry's most treasured parts of each day. "Speaking of the children," Meghan said, glancing at the clock, "we should probably start thinking about dinner. Archie specifically requested your famous spaghetti and meatballs." Harry laughed, remembering the disaster that had been his first attempt at cooking dinner for the family after Meghan's return. His famous spaghetti was really just a simple recipe he had finally mastered after weeks of practice, but Archie treated it like a gourmet meal, which never failed to boost Harry's confidence in the kitchen. "Famous might be overstating it," he said, but he was already getting up to start dinner preparations. "But I can definitely manage not to burn it anymore." "That's my bar for success, too," Meghan teased, following him to the kitchen. "Not burning dinner, not burning our relationship, not burning out from overcommitment. I have very reasonable standards." They moved around the kitchen together with an ease that had taken months to redevelop, Harry handling the cooking while Meghan prepared a salad and set the table. These domestic moments had become precious to both of them, a reminder that their love was built on small, daily acts of care as much as grand gestures and public declarations. "I've been thinking about something," Harry said as he stirred the sauce, "about what we want to do for our anniversary next month." Their anniversary had been a source of anxiety for both of them earlier in the year, falling as it did just a few months after their reconciliation. Neither had known whether they should celebrate it or acknowledge it quietly or ignore it altogether. "What were you thinking?" Meghan asked, though her tone suggested she was open to whatever he had in mind. "I want to renew our vows," Harry said, turning to face her fully. "Not a big ceremony, not something public, just us and the children and maybe Dr. Martinez, since she's been such a big part of our journey back to each other." Meghan's face lit up with surprise and pleasure. "Really? You want to do that?" "I want to marry you again," Harry said, moving closer to her. "I want to make promises based on who we are now and what we've learned about love and commitment and choosing each other. I want to start fresh, but this time with all the wisdom we've gained from nearly losing what we have." "What would the vows say?" Meghan asked, her eyes bright with tears. "I don't know yet," Harry admitted, "but I know they would be honest about how hard marriage can be and how worth it is when you find the right person to be hard with. I know they would acknowledge that love is work and promise to do that work joyfully for the rest of our lives." "I would like that," Meghan said, stepping into his arms. "I would like to marry you again, knowing everything I know now about what that really means." They held each other in the kitchen while the pasta water boiled and the sauce simmered, and Harry thought about how different this moment felt from their original wedding day. Then they had been full of hope and certainty and the belief that love would be enough to carry them through anything. Now, they had hope tempered by reality, certainty earned through trial and error, and the knowledge that love was just the beginning of a lifelong practice of choosing each other. "Daddy, Mommy, are you dancing?" Archie's voice interrupted their moment as he appeared in the kitchen doorway, with Lilibet trailing behind him. "We're practicing," Harry said, lifting Archie into his arms while Meghan picked up Lilibet. "Want to join us?" What followed was the kind of impromptu family dance party that had become routine in their house, all four of them moving to music only they could hear, laughing as they bumped into each other and the kitchen furniture. Harry spun Meghan around while she held Lilibet, and Archie insisted on being dipped dramatically, and for a moment, everything was perfect in a way that real life rarely is. Later that evening, after the children were in bed and the dishes were done, Harry and Meghan found themselves back in their office, but this time they weren't working. They were sitting together on the small sofa they had added to the room, looking through photo albums from their early relationship and talking about how young and naive they had been. "Look at us," Meghan said, pointing to a picture from their honeymoon. "We thought we had everything figured out. We thought love was a feeling instead of a verb," Harry added, studying his younger self's confident expression. "Do you think we would have listened if someone had tried to tell us how hard it would get?" Meghan asked. Harry considered the question seriously. "No," he said finally. "I think we had to learn it for ourselves. But I'm glad we did learn it, even if the process nearly broke us." "I'm glad too," Meghan agreed, "because now we know what we're capable of, both in terms of how much we can hurt each other and how much we can heal." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts about the journey that had brought them to this moment. Harry found himself thinking about the phone call that had started their reconciliation, how desperate and uncertain he had felt, how impossible their future had seemed. Now, 6 months later, he couldn't imagine being anywhere else or with anyone else. "Meg," he said, taking her hand in his. "Yeah, I just want you to know that calling you that day was the best decision I've ever made. Not just because it brought you home, but because it taught me that love is always worth fighting for, even when you don't know if you're going to win." "Especially when you don't know if you're going to win," Meghan corrected. "That's when fighting for love means the most. So we keep fighting for it?" Harry asked, though he already knew the answer. "Every day," Meghan confirmed. "For the rest of our lives." Outside their window, the ocean stretched endlessly toward the horizon, dark and mysterious and full of possibilities. Inside their home, their children slept peacefully in beds they had picked out together, in rooms they had decorated as a family, surrounded by the love that Harry and Meghan had fought so hard to preserve and rebuild. They had learned that love wasn't a fairy tale ending, but a daily beginning, a choice made new each morning and reaffirmed each night. They had discovered that the most beautiful love stories weren't the ones without conflict, but the ones where conflict led to deeper understanding, greater intimacy, and stronger commitment. As they turned off the lights and headed to bed together, Harry felt a profound sense of gratitude for everything that had brought them to this moment. The good times and the terrible ones, the public triumphs and private failures, the separation that had nearly destroyed them, and the reconciliation that had saved them both. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to choose each other, new ways to practice the art of loving well. But tonight, they were exactly where they belonged, together, grateful, and ready for whatever came next. "Meg," Harry said one more time as they settled in a bed together. "I love you too," she said, understanding without words what he needed to hear. And in the quiet darkness of their room, surrounded by the life they had rebuilt with intention and care, they fell asleep side by side. Two people who had learned that the best love stories aren't the ones that never face hardship, but the ones that face it together and emerge stronger, wiser, and more committed than ever before.